Keep moving!
The wagon will snapped loose from the axle just as the first rifle shot struck the canvas above Anna Reed's head. Daniel Mercer grabbed the reins before the horses bolted. But he was already too late to stop the stranger who crawled out from beneath his supply blankets with a dirt-covered face, shaking hands, and a voice barely strong enough to speak. "Please," she whispered, "call me your wife until we cross the frontier." Anna was thin, exhausted, and carrying nothing but a worn coat, a small leather pouch, and a folded map pressed against her chest like it was the last thing keeping her alive. She had been hiding among Daniel's flour sacks and spare wagon parts while a private posse searched every wagon leaving the settlement road. Behind her, those men were not chasing a thief. They were hunting the woman who carried the only map to a hidden spring capable of keeping an entire frontier settlement alive. Daniel had spent 15 years leading wagons through places where one mistake meant losing everything. He knew desperate people. He knew frightened people. But he had never seen someone look at a man's name like it was a shield between life and death. The posse riders were already circling the camp, and whatever Anna Reed's murdered brothers had discovered before they died was valuable enough that powerful men were willing to kill to keep it buried. Most men would have pushed her out and saved themselves the trouble. Daniel Mercer nearly did. Then Anna opened the leather pouch and showed him the corner of an old survey map marked with a symbol only a trained land finder would recognize. A water source. Not a dry creek. Not a seasonal puddle. A spring that could survive the frontier's worst summers. The same spring that a wealthy land syndicate wanted to claim before the immigrant families ever reached it. "Those men will say I stole it," Anna said. "They will say I have no right to it." Daniel looked toward the riders approaching through the dust. "Do you?" Anna's answer came quietly. "My brothers found it. They recorded it. Then they were killed before they could bring the truth to anyone." The first rider reached the edge of camp and shouted for Daniel Mercer to hand over the woman hiding in his wagon. Daniel looked at Anna. He had never taken a wife. He had never wanted a family. He had spent years believing a wagon was easier to manage than a home because a wagon only asked you to keep moving. But now a frightened woman was asking him for the one thing he had never given lightly: his name. And if he spoke the lie, every person in the convoy would believe it. That lie might save Anna today, or destroy them both tomorrow. For those who still believe one person's courage can change an entire community. This is the story of the woman who climbed into a wagon seeking protection, and the man who discovered that sometimes a promise made for survival becomes the first step toward a real home. Daniel stepped down from the wagon and faced the riders. "Looking for my wife," he said. The men stopped. And behind him, hidden beneath the canvas, Anna Reed held her breath as the frontier decided whether their deception would survive the morning. Daniel Mercer had learned long ago that a man could survive a great many dangers if he kept his decision simple. Water before comfort. Distance before rest. Trust only what could be proven. But standing beside his wagon with armed riders demanding the woman behind him, Daniel realized the frontier had placed him in the one situation where every simple answer disappeared. The rider in front wore a clean coat, carried a polished rifle, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been forced to ask permission. "Mercer," the man said, "that woman climbed into your wagon carrying stolen property. Hand her over, and your convoy can continue." Daniel looked past him at the other wagons gathering behind. Families watched from their seats. Couples who had paid for their places. People who had crossed half the country believing the rules of the convoy meant something. If Daniel admitted Anna was not his wife, she would be taken. If he lied, every person in the convoy would know he had broken the very rules that protected them. The rider waited. Daniel took a breath. "She's my wife." The words landed harder than the rifle shots. The rider narrowed his eyes. "Your wife?" "Yes." "Funny, nobody saw you marry." Daniel held his gaze. Not every promise happens where strangers can watch. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the rider smiled in a way Daniel did not like. Fine. Then your wife can answer questions herself. Daniel stepped between the wagon and the men. She's exhausted. She'll speak when she's ready. The rider's expression changed. Not anger. Something colder. Recognition. He had expected a frightened woman. He had not expected a man willing to stand in front of her. You know what you're protecting, Mercer? Daniel said nothing. The rider looked toward the wagon. That woman has been running from men who own judges, sheriffs, and land offices. You think a wedding story is going to stop that? Daniel felt Anna move behind the canvas. A small sound. Fear. But she did not run. The riders finally left after making it clear they would return when the convoy reached the registration station. Daniel waited until the dust settled before climbing back onto the wagon. Anna was sitting among the supplies, her hands still wrapped around the leather pouch. You didn't have to do that, she said. Daniel looked at her. You asked me to. I asked you to say a word. No, he glanced at the map. You asked me to put my name between you and a bullet. Anna lowered her eyes. For the first time since he found her, Daniel saw something beneath the fear. Not weakness. Guilt. My brothers believed that spring belonged to everyone who needed it, she said. They found the water while surveying land beyond the old trails. They wanted settlers to know where they could build without depending on men who charged for every barrel. Daniel studied the map. The markings were detailed. Distances, rock formations, old landmarks. Someone had spent years learning that land. This is why they killed them. Anna nodded. The land company wants that spring because whoever controls the water controls every wagon that crosses this country. Daniel folded the map carefully. He had seen people fight over gold. He had seen men kill over cattle. But water was different. Water decided whether a town lived or disappeared. That evening, Daniel brought Anna to the convoy registration wagon. The clerk looked over the list of approved travelers. Families only, the man said. Married couples only. Daniel placed his hand on the counter. Mercer, Daniel Mercer, and Anna Mercer. Anna glanced at him. The name sounded strange. Almost too real. The clerk stamped the paper. Welcome to the Mercer family wagon. Daniel said nothing. But Anna noticed something. He did not look away from the word. Family. That night, their wagon sat at the edge of the convoy. Not close enough to be trusted. Not far enough to be forgotten. Daniel gave Anna half his dinner. She tried to refuse. I'm not taking your food. You're part of the wagon now. That doesn't mean I should take what you need. Daniel looked at the empty plains around them. Out here, everyone needs something. Anna studied him. You always help strangers? No. Then why me? Daniel was quiet for a long time. Finally, he answered. Because someone helped me once. She waited. He did not explain, but she noticed the way his hand touched an old wooden box beside his bedroll. A box he kept locked. A box that clearly carried a memory he never shared. Before Anna could ask, a sound came from beyond the wagons. A horse. Then another. Daniel reached for his rifle. The riders had returned too soon. And this time they were not coming to ask questions. The second group of riders did not come with questions. They came with a document. By sunrise, the entire convoy knew that Daniel Mercer and the woman he claimed was his wife had become a problem for powerful men. The riders waited beside the registration wagon while their leader unfolded a paper bearing an official-looking seal. My employer has filed a claim, he announced. The woman named Anna Reed is wanted for possession of stolen survey material. The families nearby grew quiet. Nobody moved closer. Nobody stepped away either. That was the hardest thing about frontier towns. People often knew the truth before they knew if they were brave enough to stand beside it. Daniel walked forward. What employer? The rider smiled. Mr. Caleb Voss. The name moved through the camp like a cold draft. Daniel had heard of Voss. Everyone had. A land investor who arrived wherever people were desperate enough to sell cheap and powerless enough to lose everything. Voss did not usually take land with a gun. He took it with papers. He took it with signatures people did not understand. He took it by making the truth arrive too late. The rider tapped the document. According to this order, Anna Reed has no legal claim to any information connected to that survey. Daniel looked at the paper, then at Anna. She stood beside the wagon, pale but steady. She has a map, Daniel said. The rider raised an eyebrow. A map that belongs to someone else. Anna stepped forward. No. Everyone looked at her. She held the leather pouch against her chest. It belongs to the people who need that water. The rider laughed softly. That is not how ownership works, Mrs. Mercer. The way he said her new name sounded like an insult. Daniel noticed. So did Anna. The rider wanted them embarrassed. He wanted the lie to collapse before the journey even began. Instead, Daniel stepped beside her. She travels with this convoy. The rider looked at him. You are willing to risk your place here for a woman you met yesterday? Daniel did not answer immediately. Because the truth was he did not know why he was doing it. He knew the practical reasons. Anna had a map. The map could save lives. The convoy needed water. But those were not the only reasons. He had watched her refuse his food because she feared taking from him. He had watched her hide the map not because she wanted wealth, but because she believed people would suffer without it. That was not the behavior of someone chasing a fortune. That was the behavior of someone carrying a responsibility too heavy for one person. She stays, Daniel said. The rider folded the paper. Then when this convoy reaches the next county station, you can explain your decision to a judge. After they left, the convoy did not return to normal. Fear had entered the camp. Some families worried that following Daniel would bring trouble. Others worried that turning Anna away would mean becoming the kind of people they claimed they were escaping. The convoy leader gathered everyone near the wagons. We have rules, he said, and those rules exist because people survive when they trust each other. An older settler spoke from the crowd. Trust is hard when we don't know what's true. Anna heard him, and she understood. A promise between two strangers could protect her from men with guns. But it could not protect an entire community. That evening, she spread the map across Daniel's wagon table. I need to show them. Daniel looked at the markings. You think everyone will believe you? No. Then why try? Because if they only follow me because I am your wife, then they are trusting your name. She placed her finger on the spring location. I need them to trust the truth. Daniel watched as she explained the route. The spring was beyond the dry crossing. The land between them and the water had become more dangerous every year. Old trails disappeared. Water stations were controlled by men charging impossible prices. And according to Anna's map, there was a natural spring hidden near a valley that had been ignored because Voss's company wanted everyone to believe the area was worthless. Daniel studied the markings. This could work. Anna looked up. You believe me? I believe the map. A small sadness crossed her face. Not anger. Just disappointment. Daniel noticed. I'm still trying to believe you, he added. That answer surprised her. Most men would have lied, would have offered easy kindness. Daniel offered honesty. And somehow that felt safer. The next morning, the convoy moved. The first days across the dry country tested everyone. Water barrels grew lighter. Tempers grew shorter. Families counted every cup. And the guide assigned to lead them, Thomas Vale, kept pushing them toward routes that did not match Anna's map. At first, Daniel thought it was a mistake. Then Anna noticed something. "Look at the marks." Daniel studied the map. "What?" "The trail markers." She pointed toward the horizon. "The guide is taking us toward the old freight path." Daniel frowned. "That path adds 3 days, and it passes through land controlled by Voss." The truth settled between them. The guide was not lost. He was leading them exactly where someone wanted them. That night, Daniel watched Thomas speaking quietly with a rider near the edge of camp. A rider who had followed them since the settlement. The same kind of rider who had demanded Anna be surrendered. Daniel reached for his rifle. Anna stopped him. "No." He looked at her. "He is selling our route." "I know." "Then why stop me?" "Because a rifle proves he is dangerous." She pointed toward the wagon where the map was hidden. "We need proof." Daniel lowered the rifle. That was the moment he understood something about Anna Reed. She had spent weeks running from men who used force. But she was not trying to beat them with more force. She was trying to survive long enough for the truth to speak. The next morning, Thomas Vale announced that the convoy would change direction. A longer route. Less water. More risk. And before Daniel could challenge him, one of the water barrels was found empty. A hole had been cut into the bottom during the night. Someone inside the convoy had helped the enemy. The families looked at each other with fear. The map could lead them to survival, but only if they reached it before suspicion destroyed them from within. The empty water barrel changed everything. Before that night, the families of the convoy had feared the road ahead. After that night, they feared the people walking beside them. A wagon train could survive hunger. It could survive heat. It could survive a broken wheel on a lonely trail. But it could not survive distrust. Daniel Mercer knew that was exactly what Caleb Voss wanted. A frightened group was easier to control than a united one. By morning, accusations had already started. Some blamed Anna. Others blamed the guide. A few whispered that Daniel had brought trouble into their lives the moment he allowed a stranger to enter his wagon. Daniel heard every word. He said nothing, because he knew anger was exactly what their enemies wanted. Instead, he gathered the remaining water barrels and inspected them himself. The cut was clean. Professional. Whoever damaged the barrel knew exactly where to strike without being noticed. Anna watched him work. "You believe it was Thomas?" Daniel tightened the leather strap around the barrel. "I believe someone wanted us to believe it was him." She looked toward the guide's wagon. "Then what do we do?" Daniel looked at the dry land ahead. "Find out who benefits." That answer was the reason Anna trusted him a little more. Daniel did not chase enemies. He followed consequences. Together, they began watching the convoy. They noticed Thomas Vale always rode ahead before difficult crossings. They noticed he always knew which trails were supposedly blocked. They noticed riders connected to Voss appeared whenever the convoy changed direction. But suspicion was not proof. And they needed proof before accusing a man in front of everyone. The chance came 3 days later. The convoy reached the narrow pass leading toward the hidden valley. Anna recognized the rock formations from her brother's notes. The spring was close. So close that Daniel could almost believe they had already won. Then Thomas stopped the wagons. "We turn east." The families protested. "There is no water east." Thomas pointed toward the cliffs. "That map is wrong." Anna stepped down. "No, it is not." The guide looked at her. For the first time, the calm expression disappeared. "You should have stayed hidden in that wagon." The words were quiet, but everyone heard them. Daniel moved beside Anna. "What did you say?" Thomas realized his mistake. only for a second. But it was enough. Anna saw it. Daniel saw it. The guide knew more than he should. Thomas reached inside his coat. Not for a weapon. For a folded paper. He threw it toward the ground. A payment record. Names. Dates. Amounts. And Caleb Voss's mark. The evidence they needed. But before Daniel could pick it up, gunfire erupted from the ridge. Voss's riders had been waiting. The convoy scattered. Families pulled wagons together. Men grabbed rifles. Women carried supplies. Nobody knew where to run because every direction looked dangerous. Daniel grabbed the paper. Get Anna to the wagons. Anna shook her head. No. This is not the time to argue. It is exactly the time. She pointed toward the ridge. They want the paper because they know it proves everything. Daniel understood. The riders were not trying to destroy the convoy. They were trying to destroy the evidence. The fight that followed was not about winning. It was about protecting the truth long enough for it to reach a courtroom. Daniel and the settlers used the wagons as barriers. They moved the families behind cover. They protected the injured. They kept the evidence dry. And Anna did something nobody expected. She climbed onto the lead wagon and shouted directions using her brother's map. The left trail is a dead end. Stay together. The valley entrance is behind the ridge. She was not the woman hiding under blankets anymore. She was the person who knew where everyone needed to go. But the enemy had one advantage. They knew the land too. One rider reached the wagon carrying the evidence. Daniel saw him too late. The man grabbed the papers and turned his horse. Daniel chased after him. The ground gave way beneath the horse's hooves. Both men fell hard into the dry ravine below. For a moment, Daniel could not move. The rider stood first. He held the papers above his head. You think people like you beat men like Voss? Daniel pushed himself up. No. He looked toward the wagon. I think people like us outlast them. The rider moved closer. Then a sound stopped him. Not a gunshot. A voice. Thomas Vale stood above the ravine. The guide who had betrayed them looked down at the man he had worked for. You promised they would only lose the spring. The rider froze. Thomas continued. You never said anyone would die. The rider cursed. But Thomas had finally understood what Voss really was. A man who treated everyone as tools. Even the people who helped him. Thomas dropped a rope. Daniel climbed out. And together, the two men brought the evidence back to the convoy. But the damage was done. The map had torn during the struggle. The upper half was missing. The part showing the exact location of the spring. For the first time since Anna entered his wagon, Daniel saw her lose hope. We cannot prove where it is, she whispered. Daniel looked at the torn paper. No. He looked toward the valley. But we can prove who wanted it hidden. The convoy continued. Not because they felt safe. Because stopping would mean letting Voss win. 2 days later, they reached the county courthouse. The courtroom was small. Wooden benches. Dusty windows. A tired judge. And Caleb Voss sitting at the front like a man who already owned the decision. His lawyer placed the documents on the table. Your Honor, this woman stole private survey information and misled an entire convoy. The judge looked at Anna. Then at Daniel. The room waited. The first witness was called. Thomas Vale. He walked forward slowly. The courtroom became silent. Voss leaned back. Confident. Because fear had controlled Thomas before. And men like Voss believed fear lasted forever. Mr. Vale, the judge said, did you provide information about this convoy to Caleb Voss? Thomas looked at Voss. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Everyone saw it. The hesitation. The old fear. Voss did not threaten him loudly. He did not need to. He only smiled. Thomas looked down. Then he looked at Anna. At the woman who had protected the truth, even when it made her life harder. I did. The courtroom shifted. Voss's expression changed slightly. Thomas continued. But I did not know he planned to take the spring from every family traveling west. Voss stood. Your Honor. The judge raised his hand. Sit down. The room went quiet again. Thomas described the payments, the meetings, the changed routes. But Voss's lawyer remained calm, because the missing piece was still missing, the exact spring location. Without that, they could prove greed, but not ownership. Then Voss smiled. You have shown that my client wanted information, the lawyer said. But you have not shown that this woman had any right to it. The judge looked at Anna. Do you have the original survey? Anna lowered her eyes. No. A silence fell. For a moment, it seemed like they had lost. Then Daniel stood. Your Honor. The judge looked at him. Daniel removed a small wooden box from his coat. The same box Anna had seen him touch beside his bedroll. I have something. He opened it. Inside was an old notebook. Worn. Faded. But carefully preserved. Anna stared. Your box. Daniel nodded. My father was a surveyor. The room waited. He worked these lands before Voss arrived. He taught me that a map is not just lines on paper. Is a promise that someone cared enough to measure what others ignored. He handed the notebook forward. 3 years ago, my father recorded the same spring. The judge opened the pages. The dates matched. The landmarks matched. And one final detail appeared. A note written in the margin. A warning about Caleb Voss attempting to claim the valley before settlers arrived. The judge looked up. The official documents on the table suddenly looked different. Not false because they lacked a seal. False because they contradicted the truth. The judge made his ruling before sunset. The claim against Anna Reed was dismissed. The survey information was recognized as evidence belonging to the community effort to establish the settlement. And Caleb Voss lost control of the spring he tried to own. But the victory did not come from one person. It came from every person who chose truth when fear would have been easier. Outside the courthouse, Anna stood beside Daniel. You had that notebook the whole time? Yes. Why didn't you show me? Daniel looked toward the road ahead. Because I spent years keeping things that mattered hidden. Anna waited. And now? Daniel looked at the families gathering around them. Now I think some things are meant to be shared. The spring was waiting. The settlement was waiting. And for the first time, neither of them was running. The first night after the court ruling, Anna Reed still woke before sunrise. Not because someone was coming for her. Not because she heard horses outside. But because fear had a way of staying long after danger was gone. For weeks, Anna had slept with one hand on the leather pouch that held her brother's map. She had guarded it through dust, hunger, and gunfire, because losing it meant losing the one chance so many families had. Now the map was no longer a secret. The spring belonged to everyone. And somehow, that frightened her more than hiding ever had. Daniel Mercer noticed. He noticed everything. He noticed that Anna still saved half her meals, even when there was plenty. He noticed she still looked toward the road whenever riders passed. He noticed she apologized whenever someone thanked her, as if kindness was something she had borrowed and needed to return. One evening, while the first families began building near the valley spring, Daniel found Anna standing beside the water. You're still waiting for something, he said. Anna did not turn. I suppose I am. For what? She looked across the settlement. Children of the future would walk those paths. Families would build homes there. People who had once been strangers would share the same water because one woman refused to let greed decide who deserved to live. "I keep expecting someone to tell me it's over," she said. Daniel was quiet. Then he answered, "Maybe nobody tells you." She looked at him. "Maybe you just notice one day that you're not running anymore." Anna looked down at the water. For the first time in many months, she allowed herself to believe that might be possible. The settlement grew slowly, not easily. The frontier never gave anything freely. The first cabins needed repair. The first winter tested everyone. The first harvest was smaller than they hoped. But the spring remained. And because the water belonged to the community, no single person could use it to control the lives of others. The place became known as Mercer Valley. Not because Daniel owned it. He did not. Not because Anna claimed it. She refused. The name remained because people remembered the wagon where two strangers made a promise that changed everything. Years later, travelers would hear stories about the woman who carried a map and the man who gave her his name when she had nowhere else to go. But those stories often missed the quiet parts. They missed the nights Daniel repaired fences while Anna checked records for new families arriving. They missed the mornings when she no longer sat near the wagon door watching for danger. They missed the day she finally stopped keeping food hidden under her bed. Daniel found the old habit by accident. A small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He held it up. Anna froze. For a moment, the old fear returned. Then Daniel simply walked to the table and placed the bread beside the rest of the meal. No questions. No judgment. Just a reminder. There was enough now. There would be enough tomorrow. That was the thing Anna had spent years trying to believe. Not that danger disappeared. Not that people stopped being cruel. But that good people could stand together longer than cruel people could tear them apart. The wagon where Anna first hid became the first meeting place for the settlement. Not a courtroom. Not a government office. Just a place where people came to solve problems before they became disasters. Farmers brought disputes there. Travelers brought questions. New families brought fears. And Anna always remembered what it felt like to arrive with nothing but a map and a desperate request. She never let anyone leave feeling unseen. Daniel changed too. The man who once believed a wagon was easier than a home eventually built a house beside the spring. A real one. With a table large enough for neighbors. With a porch where travelers could rest. With a door that stayed open during storms. And every year, when new settlers arrived, Daniel told them the same thing. Water keeps a town alive. Then he would look toward Anna. But trust is what makes it worth saving. Anna never became someone who forgot the past. She carried her brother's memory with honor. Their names were written beside the spring, so nobody would forget why the valley existed. Not because someone powerful claimed it, because ordinary people protected something that belonged to everyone. And that was the final truth of the frontier. A person could own land. A person could own a house. A person could even own a name. But no one could own the courage that made people stand together. Years after the first wagon arrived, visitors still found the same wooden marker near the spring. The words were simple. A place built from trust. A place protected by courage. A place where one woman asked a stranger to call her his wife until they crossed the frontier. And discovered that sometimes the road you travel to survive is the same road that leads you home. If this story reminded you that one promise can change more than one life, write the road home in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Because the greatest frontier stories were never only about the land people crossed. They were about the people who chose not to leave each other behind.